That's right. You call yourself a real chair? I highlight every message in chat because I'm a Maxnomic. Try chatting again once you're an actual comfortable chair. Or something like that. I think I butchered that, but I got as close as I could there, chat. Maxnomic, our chair sponsor here at the SPO. You can go to needforseat.com, use code SMITEMAX. Get a little something extra on that chair for yourself. Super comfortable. I've got one at home, sit in it all the time. Recommend it to you guys out there as well. Taco's still with me to talk about our second and final matchup of the day and our sixth and final matchup of the weekend. We've highlighted it a little bit here, Taco. Slower start to the weekend in the sense that it was a long series of games. We sped up a little bit here towards the back end. Kings versus Scarabs has the potential to maybe be a little bit longer.
And we've definitely seen some good things from both of these teams so far already this week in Dulcin. And I'd imagine that both of these teams having each other's sets to kind of do some homework off of, understanding that with the Olympus Bolt and Atlantis Leviathan standing so high in comparison to the rest of the league, it'd be a prime opportunity now for either the Scarabs or the Kings to try and solidify that third place positioning.
Yes, this is a third place decider matchup. Spot on there, Taco. 1-1 for the Camelot Kings, 1-1 for the Solar Scarabs. Crazy. I mean, the Kings, I think, expected to be in that top half after the way that they sort of turned things around in the end, the mid to end of Phase 1. The Solar Scarabs, now probably not as surprising that they find themselves in the top half of the league. It was a tough start to Season 8, but they've really started to turn things around. And though they've had some stumbles, they went down 0-2 earlier on in Phase 2 to the Titans, but they beat the J Dragons again this phase. This is a team that when they're able to kind of get things going, the wheels start turning, play their own game, then they can show up, they can make things interesting. I think Inbound has been a lot of fun to follow along with on this Scarabs team. Because let's be honest, it was a rough Season 7 for Inbound, but I think this guy as a player has ironed out a lot of those issues. Of course, still some to work on, but definitely looks like a stronger player this year, helps his team win.
I think the main transition for Inbound, from my takeaways at least, are that he's just leaning a lot more into that aggressive style of play, giving Bobby a pick that he can actually use to control the pacing of a match, like the Hercules, like the Fenrirs, like the Circuits. I'm listing a lot of physical gods here, Dulcin, but it's for good reason, because you don't necessarily have to have a Guardian as that traditional support play character when you're able to introduce a lot of control through some of the warriors and assassins that we've seen Inbound piloting.
I agree. I think that's the key to the game here for Inbound, is getting one of those list of picks and getting the game kind of going in your favor. The Hercules specifically, and that's why so many of these highlights are on the Hercules. That feels unfair on Derongu there. but the Hercules highlights, that's really when I remember this season kind of sitting up in my Maxnomic chair and saying, wow, this guy is really starting to play well on some of those Hercules games that we've seen Inbound on. So I think that's pretty important, getting him to a comfortable spot. Look at the rest of the team, though. I think we've seen serious growth from the newcomers to the league. They've been surrounded by talent. They have SOT and Zapman on either side of the map, so that core young three has really made strides.
And for Inbound specifically as well, I think it does certainly help to have such an experienced hunter like Zapman right next to him to help kind of guide him through and just give him that reassurance that I think sometimes rookie members might need.
Well, Inbound, talked about him in the pregame, and we'll talk to him in the pregame here as well. He joins me for the pregame interview right here and right now. Inbound, always good to sit down with you. We're interviewing now on the back end. The last time we saw you guys play was a win up against the J Dragons. Feels like you guys have their phone number in a lot of those matchups. So 1-1 so far here in Phase 2. An 0-2 loss to the Titans, but then a win over the Dragons. Have you guys kind of identified some of the issues, what goes wrong in your losses, and then what you guys do right in the wins against the top teams like the Dragons?
I mean, I think it still just comes down to just consistency. I think we're still just a pretty inconsistent team, and we show it by kind of losing to some of the not as good teams compared to the some games we take off the good teams. Like it's just coming down to consistency. We're a younger team. It's gonna be there, and we're just hoping to just become more of a consistent team.
And I think a lot of what we've highlighted on the desk here is that you guys really have made strides in finding that consistency, and it's a lot of fun to watch. You're going up against the Kings today, largely considered one of those top teams. Very good roster here. You up against Genetics and Netrioid on the other side. What does that lane look like to you? Do you look forward to playing against those guys whenever you can?
I just think it's two of the best support players in the league, just trying to carry our ADCs across the finish line. Genetics and I, we're just trying our best out here, and we're just hoping we can do enough to carry those two.
Does Zapman hear you saying that right now? Does that?
He'll hear it. He'll hear
it one way or another. He'll hear it by your play on the map. I think is what I take from that. Inbound, thanks for sitting down with me, and best of luck.
Thank you.
Good to hear from Inbound. And I like the confidence. Look, Inbound has never been a guy that's lacked the confidence. He's always had a great attitude about things. And I think that's very important, especially with a team that's built around kind of a young core like the Scarabs team is. You've got to have that growing, winning attitude about you, because it's very easy to get down on yourselves when things get tough. But things haven't gotten tough yet in Phase 2 for the Solar Scarabs team. Things are going to get tough today. Back-to-back tough matchups, a win against the Dragons, and now they have to go up against the Camelot Kings, Taco. And I think Inbound showing due respect to Genetics, who we didn't know how this Kings roster would look. Genetics was one of the question marks on this team coming in. I think Genetics has played pretty well.
I think it's going to be an even funner or more fun dynamic between Inbound and Genetics, because they both have a tendency to kind of lean towards some of these aggressive picks, although Genetics staying a little bit more towards the Terras and the Emirs, sometimes fluctuating into that Yemoja, but it's largely just it's a similar play style, but just different sort of god pools to work with. And I actually like the way that the Inbound described that between who can take care of their hunter better, because both Netroid and Zapman love being aggressive, just kind of a given. So with that in mind, I think that the real game plan for the Scarabs is likely going to be just trying to play out of the dual lane, and probably same expectations from the Camelot Kings here.
I like this Terra pick for Genetics. I think in similar ways that I love the aggressive in-your-face from Inbound, I like the controlling setup, the Terras, the Ymirs for Genetics. I'm just now realizing it was the second bet Myth took when it was Ymir and Terra locked in. He was betting which lane one was in.
Terra.
Right. It's literally a coin flip when Genetics is on the team, because in the last 6 games it's been 3 Ymir and 2 Terra. And so Genetics plays both of those picks, so who knows which one of the two it was. Mifflin just ended up choosing wrong there that time around. So on the back of that, though, and we'll get to picks and bans here shortly, do you think that's something that the Scarabs need to look towards in picks and bans? It's been a lot of Ymir, and it's been a lot of Terra, at least in the last 6 games. Gets a little more variety, to use his solo laner's namesake. There's more variety when you look at the grand scheme of things, but is that consistent, either this or that, enough to identify one of those two in the bans?
Given the current meta and the way that we've been seeing things kind of tend to revolve a little bit more towards mid and jungle picks being banned away, I think that for the Camelot Kings and even for the Scarabs here, Dolson, they both have a lot of threats when it comes to interchangeable god picks. I think that both of these teams have really strong god selection choices that could be headed either towards jungle, solo, support role. It's hard to dictate with both of these squads, and I think that is largely one of the bigger threats that these teams actually have in their back pocket. But you have to remember, it was a different meta back in the 8.6 bonus patch when these two teams last played, as far as if I'm recalling correctly at least.
Right.
And remember, Scarabs got the better end of the Camelot Kings throughout that playoffs. So it depends for me now to see how the Camelot Kings choose to bounce back, because I think a lot of what went wrong for the Camelot Kings was just the Scarabs having a better ends meet with that dual lane.
And I like having this guy on the screen, Captain Twig, because I think the Twig versus Layers matchup in this game, very, very interesting, very, very important as well. In the win up against the Jade Dragons, Layers, in the game 1 loss, Layers went 1-5-3, but then in the 2 games that the Solar Scarabs won, back-to-back, Game 2, Game 3, 8-0-6 on the Awilix, 12-1-8 on the Gilgamesh. I think Inbound kind of hits the nail on the head in the interview there. This is a team where if you get that consistency dialed up, who knows, right? It feels like sometimes the sky's the limit with this team. When you have a jungler playing that type of way, any team's going to be hard-pressed to play against it. Now, Captain Twig, I think, pretty important in the picks and bans here. Hun Bats, Fenrir, Erlang Shen, Robin, Daji, and Gilgamesh. So he's played 6 different picks in the last 6 games. And so I think that makes it a little bit harder for the Solar Scarabs to identify what he's going to go for. Giannis, though, didn't see ban priority all that heavily in our first set of the day, but will see ban priority here. Makes sense. Baronic has played that pick pretty well.
Based off Baronic's performance against the Jade Dragons earlier this weekend as well, I think that's also playing a pretty big part as for why the Kings are choosing to strip that god choice. And Gilgamesh as well, no real surprises here. Tiamat Fenrir as a response. Fenrir being a heavily focused pick as of late here, Dolson, and for good reason. Just so much flexibility, like we talked about, both these teams are capable of. But more importantly, this almost feels like the Kings trying to leverage an Ymir selection choice early on.
That's right. The Ymir was sort of at the forefront of some of the conversation. Where does that priority lie against genetics? So are Scarabs now a chance to ban that away? The Terra was also very important. That's the type of thing, though, that teams can kind of game plan around. You know that genetics likes one or the other. There's only so much game planning you can do, right? I mean, if a guy on a pick is just playing out of this world, you're always going to be hard-pressed to have any game plan that's airtight enough to eliminate them from priority. Raijin, the final ban here for the Solar Scarabs. So the Kings still some at their disposal here, and I think this is going to be pretty telling where that priority starts to lie. The Wheelix takes a little bit out of the jungle pool of Layers. I mentioned that he had a pretty good game on that pick as well. So Layers now down 2 if you count that Gilgamesh.
And not only that, but we have seen some recent switch-ups, at least from Variety, most notably on the Kings, where Variety has actually been taking a lot of these Guardian picks, a lot of very crowd control. I think heavy initiation setup has been the primary focus for the Camelot Kings. On her, I think is just a relatively safe first pick because he's just so open as far as having that CC immunity on the ultimate. The Wheelish ban is what strikes a little bit more odd here because it does lead me to believe that the Camelot Kings certainly feel as though the Hercules presence alongside of Layers with the burst damage potential would have been a little bit too much to handle.
Baba Yaga hovered by the Solar Scarabs here. First and foremost, worth giving Hercules that extra mention. If this goes to inbound, love the pick for him. It's not going to be the Baba Yaga. Instead, it will be the Ul for Zapman. So Zuler is something that you can kind of put together there, depending on what you pair with that. If it is Hercules Uller, Taco, that is a lot of kill pressure and a lot of control in the duo lane.
Very aggressive, but Terra, I think, going to help mitigate some of that early
game aggression. We got duo lanes locked in.
She does have the potential to try and block that driving strike. We're so familiar to seeing Hercules look for those early blanks, possibly even an early Sunder, just trying to use the Earthbreaker into the driving strike. But Terra, if Genetics has strong placement of those walls, which I think Genetics is more than capable of doing, could cut that driving strike short. So definitely something for the Solar Scarabs to keep in mind. And that large AoE route definitely going to pose some issues for Hercules in terms of initiation potential.
And going back to what I was previously saying, this is not something that I think catches the Solar Scarabs off guard, this Terra picks. We'll see how well they've been able to strategize around a pick that we know Genetics likes to play. Hey, if it is the support Terra, suppose it could still be Variety in the Solar lane with that pick if that's the direction that the Kings choose to go here. Taking plenty of time to think this one over. And Osiris instead, so we have a little bit extra data here. So Osiris in the Solar lane for Variety. It's been a popular pick.
Not only that, but Lord of the Afterlife being able to prevent Hercules from having that big boon of self-sustain off of his stem, and it's also just, I think, a strong pick in general for harassing the likes of a carry like Uller, who doesn't have any sort of CC immunity on his ultimate. Have to remember that Lord of the Afterlife rooting in place temporarily could be a strong opportunity for On Her to follow up with the Desert Fury. That's some good burst damage. Not only that, but Terra as well has a solid opportunity to try and look for a stun lock with her walls.
I like the Hebo pick here for the Solar Scarabs. Granted, I just like the Hebo pick in general because I think it's a lot of fun to watch this pick work. 50% win rate, so a good example of a Hebo game and a bad example of a Hebo game so far here since he's kind of come back into relevance. Why Hebo? Why now? Have you seen enough in the 2 games that warrants continued pick presence from this god?
Mostly seems as if it might just be a pick strip away from Big Man Tings. Have to remember that Habwa, with the current top 3 that the Kings have opted for, just has a ton of burst follow-up, and I think that that's the primary concern for the Solar Scarabs. Not only that, but Habwa definitely does channel a little bit more as well into just giving the Solar Scarabs, I think, a strong counter-initiation tool.
And I think Baronic then draws a pretty important role here in this game. Counter-initiation and massive damage, ideally, onto On Her or whoever the Kings end up locking in for their mid laner. Odin has risen to prominence so far this weekend, and that'll draw a ban from the Camelot Kings here alongside a Serket ban on the other side. Daji and Loki both take a seat. Remember, those are a couple of picks, specifically the Daji, that I had mentioned being in the wheelhouse of Captain Twig here as of late. And then Loki, I think, just generally across the league, strong enough at this position to be worthy of taking away. So Captain Twig through 3 picks here, doesn't have his pick just yet. Anything jump out at you that's still available in the jungle that might be worthwhile?
Maybe a Robin.
Sure.
A Robin choice might not be bad just because it does introduce a lot of dive to actually further cover up with Osiris whenever you're using that Lord of the Afterlife Mystic Brush as well. Just makes it incredibly difficult, I think, for Hercules and Yamoja to try and peel for the Uller and the Habois. But
wow.
I do like the fact that Scarabs aren't shying away from this Yamoja pick. Have to remember that even with the Terra locked in, Variety showing so much of that Guardian selection favoritism towards the solo lane means that there is a chance that there could have been another Terra flex for him, and Yamoja could have gone towards genetics, but instead it's likely to be the Sobek in solo and Terra for genetics.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of this flexibility, and that means we assumed it might be Hercules for inbound. We were going off the data that we had at the moment. In all likelihood, now becomes Yamoja for inbound, a pick that he hasn't played in his last 6 games. Inbound has actually flexed 6 different gods in his last 6 games. So it looks like Hercules over in the solo lane for SOT. And this is not a pick that SOT shies away from. SOT is the type of guy, he gets an aggressive pick like this, and he looks for those 1v1s. Probably a good thing, then, that the Kings get a little more defensive, whether it's Terra or Sobek, a Guardian that can maybe withstand that.
It seems as though both of these teams have the same concept in mind, though, Dolson. It's all about just trying to dive the back line, and whoever gets there first, I think, is really going to be the real deciding factor, because these are both relatively strong compositions. I love the Camazots as the final choice here for Solar Scarabs, because you want to find a strong harassment tool to deal with the likes of the Merlin. Not sure that Uller and Habois could really cut the gap that that Merlin's usually able to free cast from the back line in, and layers on this Camazots could come up huge.
I think this is a good pick for Big Man Tings as well, not only just in the comparison between the 2 compositions, but I think in the past it's looked pretty good. He has only played it once in his last 6 games, 2-2-2 the last time we saw this Merlin for Big Man Tings, and it was a loss. So maybe I'm eating my words the moment I'm saying it here. It feels like, though, Taco, in desks that we've done earlier on today, there's been a clear winner in your mind, and that was usually the Jade Dragons draft. Does this one feel a little bit more equal between the Kings and the Solar Scarabs? Do you think both teams have a win condition that can be executed upon to get themselves a win here in Game 1?
For sure, especially given the fact that in the laning phases specifically, I think that it could really go either direction. For the Scarabs, I think the main thing that they need to look out for, what tends to get the better end of them, is just over-aggression. If they can just tone it back a little bit in that early to mid-game and just take their advantages wherever they're able to create them, they might not find themselves too far on the back foot. But that's usually what gets them in trouble, is just going a little too deep at times, looking for those buff invades and team fights.
What do we think about this on-her versus the Uller? Because I see an on-her lock-in, and normally when we talk about a lane with an on-her, it's I'm jumping in and I'm getting aggressive, but you also say the same things about an Uller pretty often. I mean, maybe the supports that are surrounding them kind of tilt the lane, but in the individual 1v1 sense, does that lean either way to you, or is that more mechanical execution, whichever hunter's playing better?
When it comes to Honor, him having the CC immunity, I think, will always give him that slight edge against Uller, but Uller does have a ton of burst damage. Not only that, but we know it's a pick that Zapman is very comfortable with, and Zap having a chance to play as aggressive as he likes can be a little bit dangerous for Netroid.
Yeah, Zapman definitely not one to, much like his solo laner, not one to shy away from trying to take some of those fights. I think Netroid might play this lane a little safer depending on the way things are going here, but this one gets very interesting at the end of the weekend. Camelot Kings, Solar Scarabs, Game 1. It's Hindu Man and Mifflin.
So much Dave and Taco on the desk. Yes, I am joined by the king of the Zoomers, the king of the Weebs himself, Mifflin.
Well, I've got some more, I played Smite competitively, I'm a dog owner,
I'm a dog
I
owner
like
also.
long walks on the beach, I'm into
do?
hip-hop music, there's more to me than just my my weebitude and my, what was that, zoomerness?
Yeah. King of the Zoomers, king of the Weebs. So I think
well,
that's a pretty
that's
fair
just king next
representation.
time.
No, I don't know about that. You only won one world championship on console. Start of this game, though, nothing's
Asterisk.
really going to change. Asterisk by asterisk.
Oh, because console.
You give yourself discredit. I mean, we've got plenty of console boys, former console boys.
All right, if they win,
this
I get
game.
to just claim world champion, full stop.
No, calm down. Calm down. Your gambling bets have been a bit weird lately, if I'm honest. Looking at this game, though, between the two, how are you feeling about the compositions in this one, Miff?
I think it's very interesting in that the Camelot Kings have a composition that is much easier to execute on, whereas the Solar Scarabs, their composition in the late game team fight is going to be very interesting. It's about separating the engagement. It's really SOT and layers acting as that dive, and then Baronic, Zap, and Inbound are going to have to play the back line together. If the Solar Scarabs are successful in separating the engagement into 2v2s and 3v3s, they're going to have a distinct advantage, I think.
Well, 3v2 in the mid lane right now is an early rotation from Solomon Troll. Trying to punish Twig, but can't find that Earthbreaker there after the driving strike to actually punish him further for that rotation. And that's good abuse, in my opinion, from SOT, though, realizing he's against the Sobek in lane. What's really going to happen there, let's be honest, it's just going to be nothing happening.
Yeah, it doesn't even have the ability to really clear the wave out just yet. Variety,
baby.
We're going to be waiting for a little bit.
Myth. Look at that start right from Sobek too this game. Vamp Shroud start, sustain for days, and then maybe a cheeky power spike later on if he keeps it.
Yeah, it has good physical protection as well, so he doesn't have to worry too much up against SOT. I like this item. I think Vampiric Shroud is going to be a mainstay. I mean, we've seen Guardians out of the solo pretty consistently in a post-Boots world.
Yeah.
Vampiric Shroud seems to be the go-to, but I think a little bit more so interesting Captain Twig's starter item selection, Mannequin Scepter in that first slot. Puts a little bit of a timer on your gameplay. That item falls off pretty hard around level 7, level 8. But until then, I mean, you're seeing it right now, 44 in the yellow damage columns. That swings.
And then at that point, are you looking to like sell that off, or do you keep it as the game goes on?
You kind of just hold on to it for the stats. It's not really worth the gold selling it off.
I will say, like, in terms of compositions for me, though, Myth, my only concern is the King's frontline is beefy boys. Like Osiris, Sobek, and Terra. I just don't know if the Scarabs composition is going to have the damage to bring them down.
Oh, we're not too concerned about damage. Camazotz, that is just damage. He-Bois, I mean, that's about as much damage you want. I mean, Hindu, you've been around for a while. That's the god of quadruple ultimates. Water cannon, water spout, all hitting for about 800 in the late.
Sure.
I'm not too worried about the damage output.
But if all these tanks are building full tanky for the right idea, getting the health online, will they have enough after one rotation to bring them all down? No, is my opinion on this. And that's my concern for the Scarabs of how they play these fights.
Yeah, well, if they do elongate the fights, they do have at least some sustain on the side of the Scarabs inside of that Yamoja. So longer the fight goes, a little bit more it's going to favor them, but genetics on the other side on this Terra pick can match up a little bit.
We'll say, for my liking, I'd be looking at Bobby's Sunder usage this game too, just to see how effective he can be to allow his carries to burst down, because Zap's rotation, sure, he'll put out a ton of damage if he goes for the power build, which it looks like he's doing with that Transcendent start here. But then also the He-Bo as well. I mean, Terra's not the easiest target to deal with when it comes to engagements, especially when I look at the fact that, well, the Camelot Kings have drafted a lot of issues. Baronic under pressure here, though. Knocks up 2. Still Twig attached to him. Root from Genetics connects, allowing Twig to just get in there and whittle down the health bar of that level 4 Habois. But the casualties paid as Netroid leaps on in to secure a kill from the duel. And 2-0 real quick to the Kings, and Zapman is in no man's land at the moment.
He has to jump out here, but all the abilities already been used up, means that there's really not much the Camelot Kings can do to shut him down, but a 2-0 start, you're feeling pretty good about it. That's just an unfortunate circumstance where the Solar Scarabs are trying to rotate into their own jungle, and, well, the Camelot Kings were already there.
We'll say, look at the Kings draft, though, for my liking. These are very much comfort picks for all of them, too. Classic variety, Sobek. He kind of hates and loves that god at the same time, if I'm honest. Like, he'll play it because he knows he can get a lot of wins on Sobek. Terra for Genetics doesn't surprise me. Twig on his Osiris from the OG days of his jungle periods through history. No real shock. More importantly for me, though, the Scarabs draft, Baronic on the He-Bo. I feel like this is the first time I'm really seeing him playing something that's going to be expected to be aggressive in positioning in this game.
First time in the SPL, but I've got plenty of experience lining up against Baronic's He-Bo. It's good. He's really good at it. Baronic is very willing to utilize Blink in that second Relic slot, at least if he's going by those SMITE console league days, and just honestly act as that kamikaze. Blink forward, crushing wave, deal as much damage as you can to whoever you can, and then, all right, guys, hang up my cape. I've done what I got. Maybe Layers finish off some of those skills. So keep your eyes on Baronic. I'm very excited to see how he elects to go with this build with the Vampiric Shroud in that first slot and already moving into Lifesteal. I'm kind of hoping we see some Sack Shroud.
Yo, if we can get to late game, we'll see how it goes, because I do agree that, like, that star item getting upgraded 15% extra power on all your damage and abilities, and He-Bo's rotation's relatively quick here in the jungle, though. Inbound's going to find out Netroid is on this left-hand side. He's joined by Genetics too as a red buff is attempted to be stolen away there. Fall back immediately from the Kings, though, afterwards. A lot of focus in the weekend's game so far, though, Mifflin, to the left-hand side of the map, I've noticed. Not as much attention paid to the right.
I really like how Netroid played that invade. Says, look, I'm not looking for the fight afterward. I'm not looking to take an engagement. I want the red buff, and I'm going to leave. So I'll use Desert Fury. I burn it away. I'm not overly concerned on losing that cooldown, and he's right to identify that he doesn't necessarily need that CC immunity. Layers in the jungle on this Camelot doesn't really bring much hard CC, so it's not really too much of a loss in terms of survivability in the long lane.
Well, all so far with this game, already a nice lead established for the Kings in terms of experience and form across the map. With these invades coming through, you can start to see these leads start to gather momentum for the Kings here. As Netroid gets aggressive against Zap, Zap doesn't disrespect him by standing in the way, but Netroid took a ton of damage there. Janex still trying to make it worthwhile under the tower though. Nice use of the walls, he's not going to have enough for the kill, and Netroid not in a position to follow up. Remember that ultimate's still on cooldown, and that damage coming through from Zap will just force Netroid to give him more respect. A failed gank attempt in the dual lane.
There's that veteranship of Zapman coming into play there. Zapman of 2013 through 2015 steps forward, tries to chase out that kill, tries to find the hail of arrows inbound, starting to make his rotation over, as is Layers. And, well, Netroid's pretty low HP. Maybe we see a dive here.
And in fairness, I've got to say, like, that was definitely a win for the Scarabs because Zapman did lose his beads, but at the same time, the dual lane lost their relics, and this is why you're seeing the hunt on from Layers wrapping around the back, blinking on in, looking for the shots onto Netroid. Hasn't found anything yet, but the Bat Out of Hell will secure at least one of the kills on this left-hand side. Should have been two, though, but Scarabs will be happy with at least one.
Intelligent play there from inbound. Tanks up the tower for Layers, creating the space for him to use that blink. Drops the River's Rebuke, just making sure Netroid isn't able to work his way out of there. But now, Captain Twig, trying to take a play from the Scarabs book, has a late rotation in the lane, but Scarabs not nearly as low as Netroid was. Not sure he's going to be willing to commit to this one.
Twig rotating into the side of the map now, looking for a pick as he blinks on in towards inbound. Inbound under a lot of pressure, gets the Riptide off, but the tether's still attached to him too. The storm will go through the Riptide, gets him into the air, but the damage follows on through. Beautiful play from Twig on that rotation.
Big Man Ting's a little bit late to the party, but maybe seeing if he could get involved. Throws out some of those ice shards, and, well, that's about it from him. Captain Twig able to pick up inbound, who was just trying to strip away that Scorpion inside of the lane. Maybe a slight overstay from the support from the Solar Scares, but gold lead still has remained largely the same. 2,000 at the 8-minute mark is not anything to sneeze at. That's a good amount already, but XP a little bit more important at this point. 2,500, that is a steep hill.
Over the years, we've always talked about gold leads, experience leads, and I think the one thing about mid-season is how much of a lead is too little, how much of a lead is too much in terms of being able to get back in the game. I really feel, oh my goodness me, let's fight in this dual lane, boys. Zap will escape for now with the Desert Fury weaved. He only needed two, and he found two of, I believe, the 6 or 7 that get thrown there. Nice play from Netroid. And that's because the beads were still on cooldown.
That is a classic on her play, man. I hope chat can hear the smile on my face. Disperse into Pillar Stun. Feels pretty good. SOT not feeling nearly as good. That's a 2v1.
And now with the tether attached to Driving Strike down, he does have to use the beads to avoid the tether. Pluck off the mark from Variety. Solo Troy just with the left step, and now Layers is on this rotation. Can they punish the Sobek is the question. Will Layers pull the trigger? I don't think it'll be the case there. As on the left-hand side of the map, Kings find a small win in the jungle again after killing Zapman by taking away the Scorpion.
And now their buffs are going to be enhanced on that side of the map. And with the changes here, enhanced buffs a little bit stronger. Some more power, some more lifesteal, a little bit additional attack speed, and maybe, not as interesting, but green buff going to give you HP 5 and MP 5 now. Actually a buff instead of just keeping other people's buffs alive.
What's the best one of those, though? Is it still red? Is it speed?
No, it's speed. You get additional movement speed. You just want to go fast, right? That's the best stat in the game, and I mean it.
Is it the best stat in the game, would you say still?
If I can only have one stat, it's got to be movement speed. It doesn't matter how strong you are if you can't get to the fight.
And I guess, yeah, at the same time, you can respawn from base, get back and die again consistently. That's your playstyle, if that makes sense to me. Adds up a little bit more. Approaching 10 minutes then, and the gold lead is in favor of the Kings. We do have a scrap between the two so far. And with how it's played out so far, I'm excited about how the team fights will look when we get to that stage. But just look at that left-hand side of the map now. All buffs pretty much down, but more importantly, the ward coverage from the Scarabs. They're really trying to protect Zap.
Yeah, I mean, Zap was getting a dove inside his tower at about the 6-minute mark. I'm sure he's letting his team know, hey, guys, you don't have to rotate, but at least drop me some ward so I know when they're coming towards me, and that's exactly what we're seeing here. But it is the Pyromancer started up by the Camelot Kings, and it seems like no one on the Scarabs is privy to it. Maybe it's a rotation of the gold.
It could be a rotation of the gold, but at the moment it's going to be that mid-hard peak up instead, so no gold rotation. And with that sound going off, the klaxon of the Pyromancer falling, I was wondering if the Scarabs would immediately rush the gold, but I think that window was already closed on out. Twig now rotating to this left-hand side to make sure Gold's not under threat and farm up some of the jungle buff some more.
Take a peek at this XP roundup. About 1 level in the jungle, just closed up by layers there. A level inside of the soul lane, a level in mid, and 1 level actually in favor of Zapman, who has not had to split as many lanes as Netroid has so far. So
and he's 1-0 down, like he's 0-1 in this lane. He's been ganked
That's the Zap
times.
passive, man. You got to get used to seeing this. That's an adaptation, though. Lightblade in the second slot for the Uller. Last time we saw him lock in this god, it was actually Jotun's Wrath for that just raw 50 power as well as CDR. Instead, maybe a little bit more of an attack speed focus on this Ull build.
I'm expecting it's probably going to be an Assi or the Executioner then. I mean, realistically, against the comp we were talking about earlier with the 3 tanky lineups from the Kings, he's going to be hitting these tanks a lot of the time with basics. So getting penetration online does make sense.
Could be penetration, could be the kin size. I think it is likely going to be the Aussie just for a little bit more survivability.
Just before it came in there, just so you know.
There you go, chat. I said it beforehand. My boss said so. You have to believe him.
No, they don't.
Yeah, they do.
No, they don't.
All right, well, you don't have to believe him. You can believe me maybe as King Variety here, stepping up to the blue buff, having a little bit of fun inside of that soul lane, and SOT talks up the dance.
SOT dances and goes, wait a second, Twig's here, and he waves at Twig as Twig takes the camp in front of him. Sobek also pulls the blue, but look at the Scarabs on the left-hand side of the map. They were trying to set up for a Gold Fury there if possible, but they won't find it as Solo or Troll is just forced away from the farm. The blue buff is still alive there. Meanwhile, in the jungle, Netroid's under pressure, but so is Layers at the same time, and Layers will survive the sustain from inbound coming through, as well as the pools of health. The bad health comes through to try and secure the kill, but Zapman will get that for himself, and credit there for Bobby in that stun off.
Yeah, I think Bobby is playing so well in the Umoja right now. Baronic forced to use the Crushing Wave defensively to escape away from Twig. I've been a detractor of the Bobby Umoja in the past, but he has certainly made strides. And inside that engagement itself, Netroid uses the Disperse to escape, immediately Riptide drop, locks off both laners there, and sets up for the double kill. He's looking pretty good so far in this Umoja.
Meanwhile, Netroid blinking mid lane as Baronic gets baited into an awkward spot. Nothing he could really do with the wrap around the back. And that was Baronic out of mana, just trying to farm up the wave and get the experience before recalling. Ends up being punished by the wraparound from the Kings there. Kings are here to play today.
They are. I am surprised to see with the Solar Scarabs completely eliminating the dual lane of Camelot Kings, not just falling back to the Gold Fury and trying to make a play there, but instead it was a reset to neutral, and, well, Baronic at no mana and about half HP could not survive that dive. But Gold roundup, despite having a couple more kills under their belts, the Solar Scarabs have fallen a little bit further behind. We're closer to about 2,500, maybe 3,000 in favor of the Camelot Kings here, but I already said it earlier, I think that the late game team fight is even if it is a little bit more execution-centric from the Solar Scarabs. I'm very excited to see how they play it.
And I think on paper, you know, Scarabs, they have the bigger power spikes in terms of damage in the late game. However, Kings have the survivability in the late game. So the balance of the two is really going to come down to, in a lot of ways, how well the execution of this composition from Scarabs goes in terms of, does Layers land all his abilities? Does Zap land all his abilities? Does Baronic land them all? And will that be enough to take down the health bars of the Camelot Kings?
Captain Twig finds 2 in the jungle, inbound, and Layers not willing to take that engagement there. We're starting to approach that magical SPL time where both teams start to gesture their way over towards the Gold Fury. Keep your eyes on these soul laners. Variety already made the rotation. Better believe it's going to be a Gold Fury fight.
Should be started up momentarily here, but they do know Scarabs are in the area here, but watching Layers and Baronic walk back to that back camp, they weren't aware in time. Only inbound is here at the moment. Now the Gold Fury getting very low, and no one's even in range to try and steal this away. Camelot Kings secure the Fury. Nicely timed window from them.
Variety doesn't even have to use the teleport there to get involved. He just walks over, and SOT was not ready for it. Doesn't have the teleport to match the rotation as Netroid loses out on a good chunk of damage. That man's looking pretty good here today, landing all his abilities, and Netroid suffering for it. Inbound trying to make his rotation into this lane as well. But I doubt we do see a dive. Now that the Gold Fury's dead, not too much to fight over on the map. Pyromancer going to be spawning up very soon. Should be the next POI. And, well, SOT should have an easier time getting involved.
I think that solo kill that we saw Netroid get against Zap has just empowered Zap a little bit more all of a sudden to try and, you know, reclaim, so to speak, the embarrassment of getting soloed. That's what pros really care about, is being solo killed with no interference. And that was a straight-up matchup, that one.
It sure is. You know, there was a time in an old day way back when where it wasn't just called a soloed, it was Zoloed, because Zapman was one of the most aggressive hunters we had inside the league. So maybe if we're lucky, if the fans at home are lucky, we'll get treated to that here today. Pyromancer spawning up just right now, but keep your eyes on SOT, making an early rotation, seeing if maybe he can catch out the Camelot Kings after they've stripped away this Tier 1.
No, I don't think SOT's going to find anything there. Jungle is spawning on the right-hand side, though. Pyromancer available again for both teams to look at. With the left-hand side of the jungle stripped of all farm momentarily, I do expect to see more attention paid here, and the Scarabs are here in force again. Wards deep on the right-hand side of the map, or at least in equal position. Scarabs are doing a good job of the warding for my liking right now, and it is giving them good vision of any rotations coming out from Twig. And Twig honestly hasn't rotated too much into gank territory as of yet, but it's actually Scarabs on this Pyro.
And then it is going to go down relatively quickly. Variety blinks in, gets involved, finds Baronic, and goes into the Lurking the Waters. They want to take this chase.
All this is Variety trying to force Baronic to use Relic's abilities if possible, allowing the team to collapse. Three-man clap connects. Layers flip back into a dangerous territory towards Big Man Tings. That'll force out the Bat of the Hell. Genex still giving chase. Tanky Target's able to whip the storm of these towers, but they won't find a kill or punish them for the Pyromancer being taken.
If that Rivers Rebuke came up just a moment sooner, 3 seconds even, that would have been a turnaround kill in favor of the Solar Scarabs inside of their Tier 2 tower. But still a win nonetheless. Do strip away that Pyromancer and don't lose out on any of their lives or their relics.
Exactly.
Every single relic still available to the Solar Scarabs, but with not much left to fight over on the map right now, it's not really that time in the game match where you can start looking at the Fire Giant. Could buy some time for the Camelot Kings to just get all their relics back.
If I am the Scarabs at this point, they realize a lot was invested there in that little skirmish from the Kings chasing them down. I think they would have an opportunity to maybe give chase, but looking at the ultimates coming back up already, Varieties is back online. Already Twigs around there too. And of course, Big Man Tings' ultimate is, let's be honest, always available for the most part.
Yeah, it sure is. Well, it's just that CDR coming through all the way across the board. So much survivability. Doug, what are we doing over here in the Soul Lane, man? These guys are just going to be having a wet noodle fight.
What are you blaming Doug for? There's nothing else going on the map.
He's zoomed in. He's memeing us.
Listen, I want to keep on this lane, Doug. Stay on that lane. Let's watch Sobek do the blue buff. It's really entertaining.
Well, I guess he's going to do... You know you're his boss, right? He literally can't not do it now.
I'm not his boss. I'm just your boss.
Oh, you're just...
Only your
Only
boss.
me?
Only you. Nobody else.
Well, who's Aggro's boss?
I don't know. I don't care.
I guess you don't report to him. Nice pluck from Variety. Thanks for catching that one, Doug. SOT caught out of position, but maybe there is something happening here. Captain Twigs on the rotation in.
Yeah, bad news is, though, he's got Shield of Regrowth and a Blink as well to escape. Driving Strike, Blink combination. Just had that combat long enough. And Twigs' ultimate on cooldown for a Blink ain't too bad if you're SOT.
And meanwhile, on the other side of the map, Solar Scarabs making that classic play. Oh, you guys want to put some emphasis on our Soul Lane? Well, say goodbye to your red buff, and now purple buff being looked at as well. Big Man Tings on the rotation in.
Myth is already feeling like it's going to be one big team fight around an FG that's going to tell the tale of this game. I think this could go either way so far. Genex still giving chase, though. Looking for the double root, finds it onto Layers. Zapman unchecked on that left-hand side, though, at half health. May still be looked at, but a good axe from him will prevent Genex from continuing the chase. As the Kings try to rally on this left now, the Fury is spawning relatively soon, within a minute here. They could look for some invades in the jungle.
And it is a red buff invade attempt from Captain Twig here. Just seeing if they can poke out somebody, deal a little bit of damage, strip away some of these resources so they can look towards this gold fear on the respawn. And that's a big one lost immediately.
Beads down from Baronic. It was a good beads too to prevent the pluck. But at the same time, these ultimates from Hebo have been defensive in nature and not been able to be used onto the primary targets of the damage dealers. It is really looking like one big fight is going to tell the tale of this one.
It could be. I don't think we're going to see it too much around this Oni Fury. Could be a defensive position from the Solar Scarabs, but with those relics already used by Baronic, with the Crushing Wave no longer available, got to think that the Chaos team is going to be a little bit hesitant to take an engagement in the near future.
And that little skirmish there from Twig too. I mean, you saw the Wing Blade come into play as soon as the Atlas of the Yellow River was used there by Hebo. The run along the carpet was immediately neutralized by Twig with that zoomies.
I cannot believe you just said Atlas of the Yellow
Dude,
River.
it's
Genetic
very
finds a little bit of CC on the inbound, who's able to use the engage, or escape rather, to get on out of there. But when you're leaving like that, Camelot Kings are going to go ahead and take the actual objective. Oni Fury, burn it fast.
And meanwhile, the Scarabs have two members on the right-hand side. Will get a tier 1 tower in response, all being well, unless Twig can slow them down enough. Even Hebo hanging around this right-hand side too, to make sure it drops down. The gold is relatively even then with at least an Oni Fury for a tower. It's mainly what those Oni minions can now do, I guess, Myth, across the map.
And it will split up the map pretty well here. That was the OG Sanguine win condition to immediately go to Oni Fury. All right, let's group up around the Fire Giant. Let's see what we can do on the map. And 20 minutes in, now is the time to start looking at the FG for both of these teams. Camelot Kings sitting at a comfortable 4,000 gold lead. I think we're going to see both of these squads very soon reset back to their base, pick up some wards, and then start to work their way over to the right-hand side.
I just saw Genetics head back to base then, has his Curse Donk upgraded now. in that relic slot. And I think that could be a big play this game, especially when I look at the side of the Scarabs who haven't invested in one. Generally, when there's a terror in the game, you like to see people look for that Curse Donk to kind of neutralize the ultimate and even turn it around because of the extra damage you get. But it's only going to be genetics with it this game, and that could spell some demise for the Scarabs if Bobby continues to heal in the engagements and it's not recognized.
And Bobby doesn't necessarily get to choose who he's healing inside of these engagements. That heal bounces to whoever is nearby, regardless of Ankh. It is indiscriminate in its target selection. Pyromancer is going to spawn up here, and it's Camelot Kings on the scene first. Slow rotation from the Solar Scarabs. They don't even get to look at it as it falls.
Yeah, that goes down. It's not the worst thing in the world, but
Oh,
now Bobby
Bobby
could be in a bit of trouble. He stays pushed up here, waiting for reinforcements, not realizing Genetics is just behind him.
Wow.
He's already dead. Layers commits in on Variety earlier. They're just trying to force the situation, and now instead he's the one in danger, but no further backup available for him. Desert Fury was a little bit late to the party there, so Layers will at least get his bat out of hell off, but now they're chasing from Twig. Blinks on in, gets a tether on 3, and Layers should end up dying there to the pluck from Variety. Meanwhile, mid lane, Solar War Troll surrounded, rooted in place almost, but the beads came through as Twig gets himself another kill. The chase is on from the Kings, and one fight has blown it all open. And in fairness, it was Bobby being too far forward there.
He was just so deep inside the engagement. Had full Omi there as well, but decides to dig in his heels, try and stick into his ground and wait for his team to join him. Well, when you're getting crit for 500 at point-blank barrel stuff by Netrioid, you're not going to survive very long. You're not going to be able to buy the time for your team to get there. Variety putting some pressure onto Baronic as his team picks up the Fire Giant, maybe seeing if he can strip away some of these relics, some of these ultimates. But on his own, Sobek not going to pose much of a threat, more so a god you think about with as a facilitator. Fire Giant now on 5 members of the Camelot Kings, and Tier 2 towers, they're under duress.
So now we start to look towards the Phoenixes as you giggle to yourself about saying under duress for some reason.
I didn't giggle. I didn't giggle.
Yeah.
I was just right. It was just under duress. It's gone now. It's dead.
Okay, cool.
All right, cool. Let's talk about the game a little bit here, Hindu man. Gold Fury going to be spawning up very soon, and
Have we not been
Draugr
talking
coming
about
up.
the game so far? Is that what you're saying?
We've talked a fair bit about the game. Hey,
You're
look,
in a
there's
weird
a fight
mood today,
Do it.
Mifflin. You're in a weird mood
You got a
today.
chair one. Captain Twig
This is
burned
going,
Aegis.
You know this is going 3 games, right? You're in a weird mood for this to be game 1. I'm just saying.
You think it goes 3?
Oh, yeah.
You want to bet on that?
You should not be taking any bets whatsoever. You are already in a negative for the next month or 2, young man.
Yeah.
9,000 people, $5 each.
And then another 13,000. Code Mifflin if you guys want my $5. But maybe don't use it. Just pay the full price.
But I'm looking at defense now from the Scarabs here, Miff, and it's really on the Phoenix line. What is their defense like?
It's not awful. It's more of an all-in engagement again. I was talking earlier about how they're really looking to separate these engagements and have not had the opportunity to do so yet. But now's the time for Baronic to step up. Now's the time where, had he decided to go for Blink, it could have really come in handy. You're looking for one-shots here if you're a Solar Scarabs fan.
Well, the focus they've had on Baronic so far, you can see his gold income has not been the greatest so far. Build is a bit on the expensive side too, which you can see the difference in the 2 mid laners in terms of build progression so far as well, with Tings now working towards his final slotted item and already has that relic upgraded. So the star item upgraded to the next level.
He does. The Pendulum of the Ages selected here for the Camelot Kings mid laner. Solar Scarabs, actually, now that I'm looking at it, with no Phantom selection on the side of Camelot Kings, they could just use that ultimate from the Umoja to try and separate this engagement, and then artificially manufacture 5 versus 2, 5 versus 1 inside their Phoenix.
Just going to be careful for the man who can walk through walls and blink to the backside. Looking at the carries, that's Captain Twig right now, giving some separation and
There it
allowing his
is.
team to take down the left-hand Phoenix. River's Rebuke has dropped down, and the damage is pretty good towards the frontline tanks. Netroid takes out a frontline tank on the other side, though in Scarabs, and now Big Man Tings takes out SOT. Layers is 1 hit from death, and a pluck from Variety is going to get the kill. And that is now onto the middle Phoenix, or even the game end here. Camelot Kings feel they can close this out in under 25 minutes.
Baronic and Zatman looking up to put up a miracle defense, but Hindu, man, look at that Titan. It's already gone.
It is already gone and down. Scarabs in favor, win the engagement. At least in some regards, they've got to go back to the drawing board now and work out exactly where it went wrong for them. My liking there, though, Miff, my biggest concern for it, for the most part, the Hebo mid, it's a risk-reward, and it didn't really pay off for them. I'm not blaming Baronic specifically, but it didn't help.
No, it was not the easiest to execute on. Even in the early game, was forced to use that ultimate defensively so consistently. But I think my main concern for that Scarabs draft was their initiation. They didn't really have an easy way to do it. It's maybe a Yamoja able to use that ultimate, maybe able to separate them somewhat, but it's so much harder to execute on than the likes of a Sobek pluck or an Osiris just blinking in and finding a multi-man stun. I want to see the Scarabs go for something that's a little bit easier to play.
Yeah, I completely agree. We'll see, though, if Scarabs can bounce back for Game 2 after this break.
Here. Look, every single year, the SPL just keeps getting better. Season 7 was incredible, and in Season 8, I'm sure our players are going to take their game to the next level. But in order to do that, they're going to need the best gear they can get their hands on. And that's why I'm so excited to announce the title sponsor for Season 8 of the SPL is Alienware. Yeah, that Alienware. Our players are getting the best of the best in computer gaming. These Alienware Aurora Ryzen Edition PC setups are insane. Not only will these be the PCs that the players will compete on once we are in studio, but Alienware is also providing one for each player at their home setup to make sure their practice is as good as possible. Now let's get down to brass tacks. The specs on these Alienware Aurora Ryzen Edition desktops are amazing. an AMD Ryzen 9 16-core processor.
That's a lot of cores.
That's plenty of processing power.
Plenty of cores.
If you want to stream, this is the way to go.
I know a lot about my cores, so. I mean, Pilates, right?
64 gigabytes of DDR4 RAM.
What? Is that true?
That is true. I mean, this thing has 64 gigs of DDR4 RAM.
Which you can do literally anything with.
Literally anything.
I've never had more than 16 gigs.
That's quadruple the amount I have at home.
And one of the hottest commodities in the PC world, an NVIDIA GeForce 3090 graphics card.
Insane how much better this is than what I have.
The best graphics you really need, Ultra, of course.
Content's gonna look good.
What's the point of all the power if you can't see it? Players will also be using the Alienware 25-inch 240 Hz monitors.
Man, when I load into scrims with this bad boy, I'm gonna feed so hard. And it's gonna be in perfect picture quality.
We are so excited to be partnering with Alienware for Season 8 of the SMITE Pro League. And the best part is, this VIP treatment, it's not just for the pros. You too can get the best possible SMITE experience. Just go to smitegame.com/Alienware and use code SMITEAW to get special discounts on some of Alienware's best products. Thanks again to Alienware. Make sure you're following them on Twitter and Instagram. That's at Alienware on both platforms. And you can join their community at alienwarearena.com.
And you're telling me an alien wore this?
And here's me thinking we got a break from aggro this weekend, but instead he's been on our screens all day. At least he's spreading the good word of Alienware, and you can't fault him for that one. Alienware, of course, our sponsors here in Season 8 and deserve every amount of praise that they get. Make sure to go to smitegame.com/Alienware and use code SMITEAW, and you can pick up some of the sweet gear that our pros play with for yourself. And then it's at Alienware on Twitter and Instagram to join their social media communities as well. Taco's with me to break down game number 1 between the Solar Scarabs and the Camelot Kings. And this is one, Taco, I think there are these brief moments where the Scarabs show some of that fight. I think Layers, put together you got a couple kills on this Camelot, but really just felt, I think the Kings really just felt almost unstoppable by the time this game got into full swing.
Captain Twig, especially on the Osiris, was just all up in Baronic's space. Gave this Havwa absolutely zero room to function. And not only that, but Solar Scarabs off to a little bit of a rough start. Zap taking an early spill in that 1v1 matchup, and we did touch on it on the desk, but it's just an incredibly difficult matchup, I think, for the Uller. You're at an inherent disadvantage because of the fact that Honor does have that CC immunity.
Oh, man.
Not Zetman's greatest moments, but it's almost, I don't want to say it's inevitable by any means. It's just rather unfortunate there for Zap and for the Scarabs as a whole, because that sort of side lane pressure combined alongside of the pressure that Twig was able to establish in mid and jungle up against the Camazots and the Havwa just made things a little bit too difficult. And inbound as well on the Emoja, while he did have some great placements of those Rivers Rebukes, it just felt like he wasn't able to be that aggressive driving force that we've seen whenever the Solar Scarabs have been the most successful.
Right, a driving strike might have done inbound some good there in game number 1, but SOT picked up that pick. The Kings threw us for a bit of a loop because it was a very early lock-in of the Terra, and then we figured, all right, it's definitely not going to be variety on the Terra because there's an Osiris locked in, then a Sobek gets picked in there as well. So this is the Kings team, I think, Taco, that likes kind of that double Guardian in your face, maybe even throw Warrior in the jungle type playstyle.
That's one of the fun aspects that's involved with the recent midseason changes, is the fact that it is perfectly viable now to throw Guardians into that solo side lane, because most of the time solo lane pressure is not going to be the primary focus. A lot of these engagements tend to be stemming a little bit more towards that mid-jungle territory or over in the duo lane. So for game number 2, I think it would definitely be in the Scarabs' best interest to throw Bobby onto something a little bit more aggressive.
Agreed. We'll see if the Solar Scarabs make that adjustment in picks and bans for game number 2. But this is like peak Scarabs, isn't it? Where you have a very tough game 1, but then they come out and surprise everyone in game 2. They'll push us on to a game 3. I mean, this is just the script that the Scarabs write. The set they won against the Dragons, against the Dragons. They lost a tough game 1, and then kind of blow them out in games 2 and 3. So this is where the Solar Scarabs like to operate. They need a little pressure, I think, to start to turn around in some of these sets. Sobek will be the first one banned out here. tough to deal with when Variety's playing that pick. Giannis still over on the other side. I think it probably feels bad if you're Baronic because you want to play that pick. In a weird way, like in a gamer like brain kind of way, like a respect ban like that, maybe gives you a little confidence.
It can certainly funnel a little bit more towards that confidence department. It can also just be a little bit more of a grievance because having that kind of mid-lane pressure placed against you. Well, Mifflin loves
Do you like that, Miff? A respect? You won't be able to hear him. They respect ban something against you. You seem like the type of guy that would love... Yeah, makes him play better. Yeah,
makes him play better.
Instead of makes him play better, and that's all we need to hear from
interesting. How does Mifflin normally play?
Right, so like from a 0 to a 1 is technically better, right? But
on a scale of 10.
On a scale of 10, right. I mean, it's not a binary thing, good or bad. It's horrible at 0 and then
Mifflin's
incredible at 10.
gameplay is similar to his bets.
Man, this is brutal. Miff is not even able to defend himself here, and we're going in on him. I knew that Miff would, when I said gamer like brain energy, Miff would be the type to love a respect ban against him, even though you can't play one of your favorite picks. It does let you know that the other team is thinking about you. So maybe Baronic has a little bit of that in the back of his head right now. Raijin taken away. Terra is as well. So the Kings will need 2 out of 3 different picks to drive that front line here for themselves. And maybe that's just a total redo of the strategy because I think Sobek has been pretty fun over in the solo lane. So we'll see if it ends up being Guardian, more warrior-centric here. Camelot Kings, though, I think Gilgamesh comes to mind here for the Kings. That's the priority pick, I think, that's still left unbanned.
I would say Fenrir or Gilgamesh would probably be top-tier choices here for the Kings to ban away. Gilgamesh is going to be their option of choice, but that does mean Solar Scarabs could look for the Fenrir for themselves, but with Terra and Sobek having been banned away, I would not be surprised if the Kings choose for an immediate response towards like an Ares or even an Amir. Granted, the support pick can probably wait until a little bit later on in the draft for the Kings. It depends on how comfortable Genetics is really feeling, because it's evident that the Solar Scarabs are definitely taking note of that frontline potential from the Kings.
A perfect 5-5 for Fenrir. No, a half-perfect 5-5 for Fenrir so far in Phase 2 of the SPL. So Fenrir is seeing a lot of play here. Ymir is the pickup. We will hold off on dictating where this one goes because the Kings have shown us now that they can throw some front lines at us later on in the draft. So Ymir as a pick, I think certainly good. If the Solar Scarabs throw something like the Fenrir, say it's at inbound, is that the type of pick you want to see him on here in Game 2?
Wouldn't hate seeing Fenrir for inbound, but there's also the potential that we could still see the Solar Scarabs maybe wanting to prioritize a little bit more. While it might be a squishier composition, Serket, Hercules, definitely still some viable options that could come through here for the Solar Scarabs. And again, it wouldn't really telegraph anything for another Assassin or Warrior-like pick to be added to the lineup just because of the fact that you still have to factor in SOT in that solo lane role. He can play the Fenrir, he could play a Hercules. Serket might be a little bit more statement piece for either Fenrir or Serket going for inbound or layers, but the Merlin choice almost makes me wonder if Solar Scarabs might even look for a Daji here for layers. Daji, I think, being one of the better gods at just aggressing Merlin and preventing big man Tinks from having any sort of free cast potential would certainly be in the Scarabs' probably primary interest.
It was a quiet game from layers. I did mention, 2-3-2 on the Camazots. At 2/3 of the team's kills ultimately there in Game 1. It felt like, at least in pressure, I think, probably in a similar mindset there. So layers, I think, getting onto something comfortable, something good like that Daji might be good for the Solar Scarabs. Odin locked in now. Let's throw that one on over to the solo lane here for SOT. Odin has been a pretty big force. It's all ban here in Game number 1, has seen priority from the other teams in the league so far here in Phase 2. And then I'll skip right on over the Odin. We'll talk about the Baba Yaga, also a 50% win rate. But Baba's been a lot of fun to watch and seem to be pretty good for the mid laners at player.
Baba just brings a lot of damage, and with the lockdown that Odin and Fenrir are going to be able to potentially provide, that could be an ideal route, or that could be an ideal area for the Baba Yaga in that home sweet home, all that Witch's Brew, just a lot of burst damage to try and actually deal with. And not only that, but I think Baba Yaga, her blast off is a great escape from the likes of an Osiris through that Lord of the Afterlife. If it is Twig piloting this Osiris one more time, he might have a little bit more difficulties actually trying to collapse onto that Baba as opposed to what we saw happening to Baronic with the Hawa in Game 1.
I think Twig looked good on this Osiris in Game 1, so anything that you can do to slow that down will always feel good if you're the Solar Scarabs here. Second wave of bans starting to roll through. Cerberus takes a ban. as well as Serket and Fafnir. So the Kings still feeling like inbound is going to need a pick here. I'm trying to remember if in it was early season 7 when Odin was like maybe the priority solo lane pick. I feel like we saw Odin support like once or twice, and I'm not saying that's going to happen, because I think the solo lane play from the Odin I think has just been too powerful to put somewhere else. But hey, maybe a little flexibility in the Odin from what we see here. Xing Chen also banned out alongside the Cerberus, so support heavy down the back couple. Although a little flex potential with the Cerberus, the Xing Chen there as well. And then on her one more time here from Netrioid. We already saw a solo kill in game number 1. Let's give him something that can work here in game 2.
Well, knowing Zapman, he's never one to shy away from a 1v1 matchup. If anything, he's constantly seeking it out, and it does seem as though this Fenrir is going to be intended for inbound on that support role. Definitely a strong look for the Solar Scarabs, and the set as well is interesting dynamic being added into the team comp. Can pose a lot of issues for the Anhur and the Merlins, because while they have their escapes that can be rather effective, on that same note, I think Set probably one of the better gods for just consistently sticking to a carry and winning the 1v1.
Absolutely. The question then becomes, if you look over towards the Kings draft, Ymir, Osiris, Merlin and Anhur, they have some peel back, they have some leaps away if you have to play that way. Tyr loves to get forward and aggressive. Do you think the Kings now, with the 5 that they have the ability to shut down the Set? Because as great as Set is at jumping in and sticking onto carries, every once in a while we'll see a great composition against it, and he kind of disappears.
Tyr and Osiris definitely have options to try and prevent Set from being as much of a harasser of the backline, but at the same time, this isn't going to be the same frontline crowd control lockdown that we saw from the Kings in game 1. Not having the Terra, not having the Sobek, it puts all of the emphasis, I think, onto this Tyr and Ymir, and Fearless, I think one of the probably easier forms of CC for carries to get away from. Not only that, but I'm really taking note of Zap on this Ho Yi. Love the pairing of that alongside the Odin whenever those team fights actually start breaking out. Could give a lot of objective control towards the Solar Scarabs.
And this is it's a very niche question about this Odin. I wondered, as we've seen this rise of Odin, you can ask, I guess, similar questions about something like the Ymir, something like the Emoja. I don't know if we've seen an similar rise in the pickup of Phantom as a relic. It definitely has its value. Is it worth picking up a Phantom just because there's an Odin on the other team? I know maybe double Odin like we saw the Bolts run is maybe more worthwhile, but one singular Odin, do you think that's counter-playable enough to not need a Phantom?
Well, the vast majority of the Kings roster can actually escape from that Odin cage. It's really only genetics that is really possibly going to be the focus for the Solar Scarabs. But again, if this is an Odin for the solo lane, like we both are probably leaning towards, SOT is not going to really be involved, so I don't think that punishment aspect is really going to be as steep against genetics here.
Do you like the Odin less then because of the draft that has since been picked up here by the Kings?
No, I think that Odin definitely still has a lot of power swing potential here for the Solar Scarabs. It really just depends on how well Set and the Baba Yaga and even the Fenrir can kind of force the carries from the Kings more out of position. They're just looking for the big separation. That way they can try to capitalize on the back end with the Set.
And look, we've talked about this. This is the type of game that the Solar Scarabs like to play. Game 2, backs against the walls. We'll see if we go on to Game 3 after this.
Thanks so much, Dave and Taco on the desk. And Myth, they kind of just did you dirty on there for no reason, huh?
It's just how it is, man. I didn't want to complain about it, considering you are the big boss in charge.
You want to make a formal report now?
Yeah, I think so. I was thinking about going straight to HR, but since I've got you here, Dave has been bullying me.
Yeah, how so?
Oh, well, you heard it. He did it live on broadcast.
Sure.
I could just drop the VOD.
Well, when you don't owe us thousands because you make stupid bets with chat, then we can discuss it, okay? How about that? But to be fair, bit rude of both of them. Both of them want to be SPL players potentially. Dave can barely cast. He can't get swole. And meanwhile, Taco's been trying to do it for years and still hasn't made the pro scene. And yet both of them are roasting you when you won a world championship. Bit rude, that, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a little bit ridiculous, but you know what? Those have-nots are always going to hate on the haves, and
that's
right. I'm kind of a have, so that's how it is.
Talk about having this game. I feel like the Scarabs have a much better draft this time round. I really do like this composition they put together here, Myth, and I really do feel like when it comes to the team fights, it's anyone's game.
It is. It is still a little bit more on a high execution note.
That's
because
true.
The in-gauge, it's largely going to be SOT with maybe a blink cage. You can rely on inbound to get that single target CC with Ragnarok, but outside of that, It's really about ranged poke.
Love that little scrap between the two. When the health bar gets to that last blip in the solo lane is the only time I really get an interest in of like, I wonder who's still got abilities up here as we tune into it once again. But in mid lane, Twig is starting to whack away at Baronic, and the question is, what did Baronic go for in terms of first items? And did he get that blast off to escape, or did he go for the potion baron, the brew available to him to help him out in that? But at the moment, it's favorable for the Kings.
It sure is. And that's Captain Twig again trying to utilize that Mannequin Scepter in the early game. That was, what, 3 auto attacks on a Baronic that dropped him just below half HP inside of that one. This is, that's a play you love to see. I know that one. The Fearless to cancel the Bird Bomb from coming through. Variety, that is tough timing.
All about the audio cues for me to be able to realize that window. But now, with Layers walking in here for a second, Variety realized in time that it could have been under a bit of pressure, so Layers just coming in, getting her level 3, helping out with the Totem Aku, as the dual lane is just a farm fest for the time being. Fenrir and Ymir both in that lane, they both have kill potential, but it's definitely whoever makes the foot wrong will be punished.
Yeah, Inbound's likely going to be waiting until level 5 to try and punish Genetics inside the early game, which is why Genetics decides to pick up that slightly selfish relic selection, but correct inside of the beads. Is going to be able to avoid that Ragnarok ultimate consistently, as well as having CC immunity in the Shards of Life. So Inbound got to be very choosy with his targets. Has a couple good ones, though. Variety and Captain Twig susceptible until level 12.
First small win for the Scarabs and the Dueling is they do take away the Scorpion from the left-hand side of the map of the Kings and give themselves a small little lead. It's not a huge lead or anything like that, but those small windows do develop as time goes on. As a jungler look at the early game, I'm expecting to see with Twig, with what you're saying with this Mannequins, to maybe be the aggressor a little bit more in the early game and set to farm up, counter-initiate maybe.
Yeah, maybe. Set could look to dive elsewhere as well. He doesn't necessarily have to be exactly where Twig is. They both have a good deal of kill pressure early, regardless of what the other one's doing. But as far as objectives go, Captain Twig is going to have a distinct advantage in burn. So we might see the Camelot Kings emphasize these Gold Furies, these Scorpions, these Pyromancers very early on, especially if that is a stone-cutting sword selection from Captain Twig.
Speaking of items too, support builds are always going to be of interest to me specifically, just because I love support for the most part. But more importantly, it's about the variability of the build now in the early game, and it really comes down to against the composition you're against for the most part. And this time around, you can kind of see the differences here. Genetics going for this fast sovereignty rush, getting those extra protections online for his team to deal with Set. I'm expecting more than anything else in these engagements, whereas across the way, Bobby looking for more than likely a Thebes early on.
Yeah, not just the Set, but it's a quadruple physical stack here from the Solar Scarabs. It's all up to Baronic to be the sole source of magic damage. As Layers going for a bit of a dive. Tings able to flicker away from this one, and both gods, and Baronic, well, he went home. That's home sweet home right there, but maybe a little bit out of range.
Is it going home if you don't leave home?
Well, he's not in the home right now. He's in like a cauldron, then he gets in the house, so that's, you know, there's something to it.
That's true. That's true. Fair point. Level 5, though, for Zapman on this left-hand side. Slight lead over his counterpart in Netroid, who's doing a good job of, well, pincering the minions into a nice little nest there to force Zapman further up in the lane. But with the ward vision you can see the Scarabs have on this left-hand side of the map, nice and clear to know he's not going to get ganked. He's just going to deal with the manual running of Genetics here, who went for the beads and not a blink.
Yeah, had Genetics gone for the blink there, that would have been a much more interesting play from Netroid to force Zapman further up. But as you've already stated, Genetics has to rely on his feet to get himself where he's going, as he does have that bead selection. I'm keeping my eyes on Inbound right now. I want to see what he does with this Ragnarok in the early.
Pressure on the right side from Layers, though, looking towards Variety, who's looking for a Fearless where he can. Still has Lawbringer available, though. Trying to keep himself out of combat and get a blink off to hold onto that Lawbringer if he can. Sustains off the camp as he's looking to get stunned. Solo or Troll. Off the mark, and in comes Twig.
That's a double dunk there from Captain Twig. Layers trying his best to get out alive, and that's just good peel from the Camelot Kings. Variety didn't seem like he needed it too much, but nice to keep the Solar Scarabs on their toes.
Really, you know, just surprised how Variety played that. You're worried about him for a long period where you're like, are you going to ult away? Are you going to blink at some point? Instead, he just waited for Twig, and now Twig might find a window in SOT. Tether just falls off, but the sickle will be enough to strike down the solo laner, as well as take away the blue buff on the right-hand side. Kings have claimed the first scalp of the game.
Camelot Kings keeping the pace up against the Solar Scarabs, and now stripping away a little bit more of that farm. Back camps, yeah, that's mine. Other back camps, also mine. going for the Greater Scorpion as well. They are trying to keep this pace up. They want to spawn these POIs on the map to force the Solar Scarabs to take these engagements inside the early.
I gotta say, when we look at player cams for the most part, most players look so calm on them, which is the weirdest thing to me, just like how relaxed most of them are. Specifically Twig, we just saw moments ago, who just, you know, walk in a park. I'm just throwing sickles out, getting kills left, right, and center.
Hey, they've been doing it for a long time. It becomes second nature after a little while. I mean, tens of thousands of hours mastering their craft. They don't get too excited, not even for pentakills sometimes. It's just another day at work for them.
Another day at work, especially in the regular season 2, as we're in week 2 of Phase 2 here. And this is going to be an interesting phase to see who comes out on top. Sure, Dragons won first phase, but their performances of late haven't been the greatest. Sure, they took down Valkyries early on, but more work to do for them as that man in the jungle now in an awkward spot. He can't get over that wall, but he will go over that wall instead. And Netroid was waiting. He read the option well, and Twig's there to deliver the killing blow if required, but Netroid will claim that. Twig now leaps away as Inbound gets aggressive. Looks towards Netroid, looking for the Ragnarok, leaps away. Netroid still under some pressure here, and instead, it's Netroid just throwing those spears into the face of the wolf that jumped on him, and he has been punished.
Man, I like the thought process there from Bobby. Decides to wait out the pre-beads from Netroid, but well, you're not going to survive taking all those auto attacks and the impale to your face. Zapman as well getting caught out. That is clean play from the ADC on the Camelot Kings. And, well, this lead is starting to look a lot like Game 1. We're already looking at 2,007 minutes in.
I will say Anher's got one of the best passives in the game too. With the amount of extra damage he'll do, the more he hits basic attacks. So the longer you hang around him, the more dangerous he's going to be against you. And, you know, the delay, like you said, of the Fenrir ultimate makes a lot of sense. But in doing so, you keep hitting those basics to the face. You're not going to live very long. Layers might not live very long here. Variety has anything to say about it. And it's Baronic now, who was rotating and maybe pinched by 4 members, running him across the map here. And now he's in a lot of trouble, has to beads away. Now it's Layers who came back in to wrap around and support, getting picked off by 4 members. The Kings are starting to rout the Scarabs.
It's just this right side pressure. Variety pulls a very early lead as Layers soaked up a little bit too much farm from SOT, and now we're starting to see that level disparity, and Camelot Kings obviously going to play around that one. SOT just now ticking over to level 8. Well, Harry's been level 9 for a little while now. That's Variety over on that tier pick. But you could see how that lane's really started to play out by reflecting on that tower damage. Variety very focused on rotating these mid fights and these fights inside the jungle, whereas SOT on this Odin pick, a pick that you would expect to want to rotate out a little bit earlier on to utilize that ultimate with his blink, has been largely inside the lane, which is why Variety's tower is taking a good deal of damage.
And with this game too, I mean, look at these two compositions, not the teams, just the players on these teams too, of how these were formed in the start of Phase 1. Honestly, looking at them, the longer this goes on this year, I feel these are the two teams for me that have the biggest glow-ups as the year progresses, the longer they work together. Some members of the Kings, for example, have played together previously before. Twig and Variety go back to the early Season 2 days playing together once upon a time. So the synergy is definitely there for them, but Scarabs building their synergy as a whole so far this year and continuing to grow as Zapman tries to get his camp, but Netroid's here to keep him honest. Meanwhile, it's Twig in the jungle, leaping away from Inbound, who's still giving chase with the Ragnarok. Just hasn't got the pace online to keep going. Genetics, meanwhile, on the back end of this, keeping 2 members of the Scarabs busy, and Leia's getting very low at the tail end. So is Genetics, however, and the body blocks from Twig will prevent Genetics' death. Leaping in his Inbound, but he can't find the basic. It does open the window for Zap to get it, but it costs Bobby his life as Variety makes this rotation. Now Twig still on to Zapman, but a good ricochet bounce to slow down this Osiris jungle and stop him finding the kill onto Zap.
That is a support for support trade that I would say honestly favors the Solar Scarabs. Bobby already being 0-1 there means his bounty is a little bit less. It means that I guess you can say the Solar Scarabs come out ahead inside of this engagement, but take a peek at the relics across the board. Not too many used from the Camelot Kings. It is a much slower pace here from them, but they have just started to hit some pretty nice power spikes. Captain Twig picking up the Chalice of Healing as well as the Witch's Blade means that he's going to have decent survivability in these engagements. This auto attack focused composition from the Solar Scarabs is going to be suffering from that attack speed debuff. Layers, Inbound, Zapman, all very heavily reliant on their auto attacks.
Problem so far, though, for the Scarabs here is the middle of the map is starting to struggle. Baronic 2 levels behind that of Big Man Tings with how this one began. And also layers in the jungle falling behind that of Captain Twig. You'd hope with the set jungle here that they'd be able to get the farm going a little bit more so than that of the Osiris and focus towards the late game. But at the moment, it's been the center of the map that's finding the advantages here for the Kings.
And now the Kings are going to push that advantage towards the Pyromancer. Nobody from the Solar Scarabs privy to this one. Going to go down for free, and they realize it once that sound effect plays out. Can't even start to look towards the Gold Fury as, well, Camelot Kings had stripped away those oracles. They have perfect vision on it.
Yeah, just wondering where we see the builds develop to next. Netroid did go for the Ekfile into the execution of this game. I think Anher is one of the only ones that you're always like, he should always get Executioner. Just because it makes so much sense with how his passing works and Anher himself in general. Bobby in the jungle, though, getting aggressive against Shinix very deep on his own there. The rest of the team were kind of hovering around the Gold Fury area. It didn't really come for much. And that kind of damage check up against Twig there, who now has actually picked up a nice little item for himself. We're reducing the attack speed of the rest of the team with that Witchblade.
Sure is. And take a peek at the stacks from Fenrir here. His layer's in a little bit of trouble towards his tier 2. Blink in, burns the beads. Can he pick up the kill? Well, no, Variety's happy stripping away that defensive relic.
He could have got it, but it probably would have cost him his life at the other end. But look, in the jungle, SOT just trying to get his own blue buff, rotate on 2 by 2, and now Variety walks back to this solo lane and goes, thanks very much, boys. I know I didn't get layers, but I'll take the kill on SOT.
But inbound Baronic able to strip away the red buff on the opposite side of the map. Genetics trying to keep them there a little bit longer. Netroid started his rotation and then decides against it instead. Heads on back over with red buff dead already. Not much to fight over on that side of the map, but this gold lead Hindu, 4,000 already, 12 minutes in? Yeah. That's tough.
It's definitely a little bit tough, and the difference is, though, is when it gets to 5k, that's 1,000 gold per player, right? But it's mainly the net worth of where that gold is distributed, which is quite important to me. And if you think about it, it really is 1,000 gold per person for the Camelot Kings. It's poor old Genetics, the classic support situation of everybody else gets gold but me. That's the tail end of that squad.
Yeah, Genetics leaving his lanes alone to farm up a fair bit, but has not fallen behind. Zapman
Bobby's
dead. Spot this out.
Bobby's dead at the same time in the mid lane as the Gold Fury is getting done. Can Zap strip this away with the Suns is the question. Reset by the Kings. Contest is happening. Kings get the Gold Fury. Zap did what he can, but he may just be punished for it. The Desert Fury did a lot of work with that pillar, and Variety claims the kill. Baronic's house will not keep him alive long enough there through all the damage of these auto attackers running through, specifically Captain Twig, as the game is starting to fall further and further into the grasp of the Kings.
Just a tough situation. Zapman legitimately plays that right. He has to go for the steal there. He has to pull it himself and see if maybe he could secure it away with a ricochet. Being the only one there from the Solar Scarabs means he has to go for those hero plays because we're already looking at such a large deficit. Every single bit of gold, every objective that the Camelot Kings get at this point is putting this game further and further out of grasp. Doesn't work out for him this time, but you got to give props. That is a good call from Zapman.
If it's anyone, though, at the end of the day, in this league at the moment, with how this game has gone, that you have hope could come back into it, it is the Solar Scarabs.
It is. if you say so. Listen, I've got hope for them.
We're looking at hope here, you know. We're looking to see the Scarabs kind of bounce back. Maybe a Gold Fury steal there from Zap could have been, you know, the turnaround play they needed to find a window. But at the moment, Kings are starting to really push away. Tier 1's down in the left-hand side. They're starting to group up around the mid and the right-hand side of the map with the Fury being down. And what you'll see is the Scarabs just trying to find windows now on this left-hand side to catch up in farm where they can. Zap a level down, as is inbound in that duo lane. And this is just allowing the Kings to run it down mid to an extent and take this tier 1 tower.
Baronic can't step up to defend their 3-level deficit on his own. Big man Tings flickering and aggressive as Layers caught out.
And Layers will get frozen in place, take a bit of damage, jump away to safety. The rest of the Kings following up to get the red buff, and Twig was feeling himself, looking for the all-in onto Layers around the back. Didn't find he was looking for, but did get an Aegis. Zapman, though, an inbound, combining from the backside, looking towards Netroid, whose beads and Aegis is keeping him alive. He needs one more auto on Zap. Zap hovers and dunks on down with a slam. He'll die to Twig, though, as the circle connects, as now Big Man Tings looks at 2 up in his face, and Tings happy to fight with that soul gem leaping in. Is there the Lawbringer from Variety? Should be able to pick up the pieces of inbound, and it's only SOT alive with layers waiting in the wings. I don't think layers can really do much about the health bars of the Camelot Kings.
SOT just buying a little bit of time there. Defensive relic is expended, but Variety so fast already. Triple kill for Captain Twig, who gets credit for that one. And layers fresh out of base. Well, he might just go ahead and go back to it, now down to 50% HP.
Definitely a bit of a feeling of seasoned play here from the Kings compared to that of the Scarabs so far this year. And it's starting to run away. I do like the experimentation, the adjustments of compositions here. I don't think the Scarabs' composition is bad at all, in my opinion. I think it's very competitive, but it's just not worked out with how well the Kings have played.
No, the pieces that needed to perform in the early game didn't get off to the greatest start for the Solar Scarabs. Had SOT been able to rotate out of the lane a little bit earlier on, had inbound, got off to a bit of a better start on this Fenrir, that could have really brought some nuance to this composition, create the space for Layers and Baronic to farm up. You were talking about it earlier. We'd expected this set to just spend the majority of the early game farming to try and outscale this Osiris. He wasn't afforded that opportunity. The Camelot Kings have been putting the pressure on from minute 0.
And this is the thing when you get into your own games at home too, right, Miff? And you're looking at what the compositions are, both teams. Try and stifle, frustrate these late game carries that just want to farm up. Try and put the pressure on in the early game if you've got that advantage and you fall off. Try and abuse the situation of knowing the god matchups, and the Kings have done that very well here.
They really have, and now we're starting to see the fruits of their labor.
16-minute FG, dude.
Yeah, 16-minute FG, 5 levels in mid, and then a couple levels scattered elsewhere on the map. But that 5-level mid deficit is the largest one. Big Man Tings can essentially do no wrong on the map. Who's going to dive him? The level 15 set? Well, Big Man Tings has 3 levels on him. There's not enough damage output from any individual member of the Solar Scarabs to really put the threat onto this Merlin.
Noid be in the jungle right now, looking to kind of frustrate Twig in a weird way, but Twig will blink away, surprisingly enough. Guess he's worried about how many people are around him. Still has beads, won't consume them yet. 3 members now surround Captain Twig, who is level 16 here, up against Zap, who's also level 16. 4 members are diving Twig on the left-hand side of the map as they lose a Phoenix on the right-hand side. You can see the frustrations with the team if that's the call they're making here at the moment, to go that deep in the jungle for a pick on Twig and lose a Phoenix in the process.
That was 4v1. It took them about 15 seconds. They lose a Phoenix, and Twig legitimately almost killed Layers inside of all of that engagement. Tough loss for the Solar Scarabs inside of that micro play, but the Camelot Kings going to try their best to try and stop the Solar Scarabs from getting whatever they can. Tier 2 tower will fall, but the chase is on. Genetics has a tall task ahead of him and realizes he cannot find that wall, so instead, maybe the Camelot Kings still look for the chase. The Solar Scarabs are getting a little bit greedy here.
They don't know the farm they can get, though, but I do think Variety's got a good angle to catch him on the way back to base here. Taking that purple is going to cost him big, but the Fearless off the mark. Lawbringer should connect, however, onto Zapman and juggle him into the air, but the Ring will prevent the follow-up from the Kings. It's been a weird weekend this weekend, Miff, if I'm honest. I mean, it was the first weekend we got to see the new patch getting played by all the pros, and you can really feel that the teams are still experimenting, trying to find out what is the correct meta, what is the correct path. They establish it as they play, so to speak, and it's not as behind closed doors as it once was. I will say, though, the games this weekend have been very one-sided. You know, it's either been blowout one way or another. I don't think there's been too many that has been even throughout the entire game. It feels like one team has taken advantage and really run with it consistently.
Yeah, there's been a couple 3-game sets, but to speak to your point, each individual game in those sets have been a little bit on the one-sided side. Now Camelot Kings trying to keep with that trend and stifle the Scares before they're given any opportunity for a comeback. Tier 2 tower going to get stripped away here, and no one from the Solar Scarabs is willing to step up. Cannot blame them.
So what's your takeaways for this weekend then, with how this weekend's gone, you know? What are your takeaways that you're looking to see people bring into, you know, week 3 when we come back and see them all next week?
Vampiric Shroud's really good. Baba Yaga has been a standout god. That's a god Aggro's really been singing the praises of, maybe a little bit ahead of his time. But Phoenix Siege, let's see what the Scarabs got.
Let's see. Inbound jumps in, connects with Genetics. Netra did at least take a bit of poke damage from Layers on the left-hand side. Middle Phoenix only at half health right now. Remember, the right-hand side is already down as Variety juggles Layers into the air, but now Variety surrounded by 4 members, a little bit deep in enemy territory. Scarabs, meanwhile, though, don't want to get focused on that too much because the Phoenix is still alive.
and it's burning down quickly, but it's a reset. They're focusing on the engagement. SOT deep in the back line. Nice cage.
Zatman 1 health from death, though, as Twig secures the kill at the back of that. The ring is down and already consumed. Still, Genetics is alive, as is Twig. But the Phoenix shot came through huge to help out players. And, of course, Baronic in tow. 2 for 2 so far. Middle Phoenix still stands. That defense from the Scarabs ended up helping them out a lot. I did say the longer this goes on, the better you feel if you're a Scarabs fan, because you're kind of used to being in this situation.
This is exactly where they flourish, but it is still an 11,000 gold lead, and the Camelot Kings know about it. They want to finish off that Phoenix.
Leia's going to deal with a lot of fire minions on that right-hand side, which does expose it enough in mid to bring down that middle Phoenix here. SOT under a lot of pressure. When he leaps, he's going to be careful of a fearless wall combo to bring him down as he looked to run back to base. The Kings find another kill and fall back to strip some jungle.
Man, that is crispy team play. I love seeing plays like that. Genetics drops the wall just to make sure Variety doesn't push him too far away, so there is some follow-up there from Big Man Tings, who was essentially allowed to free cast throughout that entire engagement. Captain Twig and Netroid were the recipients of the aggression and do fall, but maybe got to keep your eyes on the level 20 Merlin. 2-0-9, tons of damage, plenty of items, and well, I think he might end this game undying if he keeps this pace.
Quite potentially, yeah. It's hard to get to him at the backside of your front lines doing such a good job of getting focused and taking the focus away from you. And in fairness to the Kings, they've got players over in Europe too right now on ping as well, but they're still performing to a decent tier. Sure, they would like it to be a bit more even overall, but they're doing a good job still at the moment. At the moment, though, King Big Man Tings. You reckon King is the right name for him?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like all of them are running the King title, right? That's not clan tags, that's just the title inside the game. And, well, Big Man Tings has been having a great year so far, so I will not slight him for giving himself that royal tag.
Scorpion goes down on the right-hand side. FG2 to spawn again. And yes, I say again because the Camelot Kings took a 16-minute fire giant this game. Will we see the Scarabs get in a position to stop this? I don't think so. 3 members on the left-hand side, but the biggest drogger of the weekend is getting taken right here.
Hey, that's straight out of patch notes. Hey, if they're on Fire Giant, head over to Draugr. Make sure lane's a little bit easier. He said this is the Solar Scarabs buff. We'll see if they can utilize it. Now the towers are going to have a little bit more mitigation and more damage.
What towers do?
Okay, well, the Phoenixes.
What Phoenixes? I mean, only this one that's at half health, and I don't think we'll see the Scarabs get back in time to defend it still. The Phoenix is taking a bit of time here. Minions whacking away, but Phoenix does fall on the right. Left-hand side one is still standing, but I don't think the Kings really care about that. Into the throne room they go. The wall from Genetics gets the frost onto Baronic, forces out the beads and the ultimate too. Kings being patient though, whittling down their health bars, not overcommitting for the Titan just yet. An ultimate consumed by Baronic inbound, and Zatman makes it a lot easier to siege up for the end if they want to.
It does, and now maybe looking for some of these picks here. So our Scarabs have a good deal of their relics still available to them, but they gotta dig in their heels somewhere. Someone has to step up and stop this damage.
Zatman getting 1v1 against Twig, forced back to base after losing his health bar, and it opens the window for Big Man Tings to find the kill on Baronic. Just like set 1 today, the Kings are now doing the same sort of impression as what we saw of the Dragons trying to take on multiple jewels and claim some more lives. SOT still looking at Twig, and I don't even know who's going to get the kill on him. Mystical May will be damned, it won't be enough as Big Man Tings helps out his jungler to secure the Camelot Kings the victory. And the icing on the cake is killing someone in the fountain. Camelot Kings are going to take this one 2-0 here today, and the disrespect confidence at the end of the game across all their faces as they take out the Scarabs in 2 quick games.
Just had to show off that they had some relics to spare there at the end of that one, Hindu man. Solar Scarabs coming to this week with an interesting draft in Game 1, and in Game 2, try and get it back into that realm of just, all right, we're going to play the meta. We're going to see what's best here, and it does not quite work out for them. Need to shore up that early game a little bit so they can utilize that draft. Camelot Kings, though, congratulations. Great win.
I don't know what I'm going to do with the rest of my day. The SPL ended way too quick today, if I'm honest.
It's like 4 o'clock, right?
I don't even know what time it is. All I know is very, very early. 4:20, I know what I'm doing now. After the break, we'll break it down on the desk.
Genetics. Who needs good ping when you got mechanics like that between Kings and Genetics?
This one's convincing from the Camelot Kings on their way to a 2-0 win. And what you shouldn't need any convincing on is going online to shop.smiteproleague.com and picking yourself up one of these sweet pride shirts that we got on sale there. All proceeds, of course, donated to the Trevor Project. The 22nd, so I think that's 4 days from now, is your last day to pick up one of these hoodies or T-shirts for yourselves. I love the one with all the hi-rez icons on it. Of course, I love the one that I'm wearing now. Fits great, feels great, so go online, grab one. All proceeds, going to a great cause. So shop.smiteproleague.com. By the 22nd is where you'll go to pick one of these up. Taco with me one final time today to talk about the big winners behind us, the Camelot Kings. They turned things around. Not really. They turned things around from the Phase 1 playoffs is what I'm trying to say. Remember, the Scarabs kicked them out. And they get some revenge here on their foes.
Very nostalgic set for me personally, and probably for a few people in chat. If anybody remembers Variety, when he was first really making his name, one to be feared in the Smite Pro League, it was the tier that really came to mind back then, and seeing him whip it out now in just as top tier performance as you would expect, it was just so much control, created so much space for Captain Twig, and again, the side lane dominance just ended up getting the better end of the Scarabs.
Yeah, Netrioid early on made no secret on how he wanted to play this game. We saw a glimmer of it in Game 1, and then here in Game 2, jumps in onto Zapman early, follows it up with a big kill onto inbound a little bit later on, so a double kill early for the on-her. But then it really feels like the front lines start to drive this game. And now it's back-to-back games, Taco, where the triple front line, triple jump in and engage composition, I guess Ymir has to blink his way in, he can't jump on in, but triple front line has been working for the Camelot Kings.
Could you imagine if Ymir actually had a jump?
You know what would be cool? So in Paladins, Inara, one of the characters, can throw a wall underneath, or throw a wall out, similar to Ymir, but you can put cards in her loadout that launches her into the air. That'd be pretty sweet. If you put the wall underneath yourself on Ymir, it like launched you into the air, and then you could choose where you landed. That might be pretty sweet tech, except I would hate that if I were against it, because it would just mean that Ymir
just want to watch the world burn with that suggestion.
Well, Ymir would just be landing on top of me, and I'd be dead every single time I have to walk up to it. But really, triple front line now in back-to-back games for the Kings, and Taco, maybe that's a sneak peek at the right way to play this meta, at least for the Camelot Kings.
At least for the Camelot Kings, yes. It certainly seems as though their emphasis on frontline presence in order to really let their backline prosper certainly working out in their favor, but I really was impressed by Captain Twig on the Osiris. He did a great job, I think, at just playing that heavy distraction factor with the Osiris against the likes of the Solar Scarabs.
Yeah, Captain Twig, played a big role in one of the three frontline players here for his team today, and we'll hear how Captain Twig is feeling after the big 2-0 win over the Solar Scarabs. Twig, congrats on the win. Thanks for sitting down with me. First and foremost, Goremizer brought it up to me. He's sick at home today. Get well soon, Gore. But he brought it up to me and makes a really good point. Solar Scarabs were the ones that kind of gave you the boot from the Phase 1 playoffs. Was there a little extra in this game? You guys had to come back, give them the swift 2-0 as a bit of revenge?
Not so much. I do love the Scarabs, and I think if we're not in the set, I do root for them most of the time. So no extra venom.
Fair enough. Look, we've picked everyone's brains. We got some support thoughts, some hunter thoughts. I want to hear some jungle thoughts on how the meta has been shaping up. It was a big update here recently. What types of picks are you starting to see? I mean, triple frontline seemed to be pretty fun here for you guys. Is there a lot viable in the jungle in your opinion right now?
Yeah, I don't know, but I think the removal of boots made whatever specific angle you want to go even more strong. So
Sure.
You might see more heal comps, peel comps, Artemis comps, just different maybe dive comps from the bolts.
Right.
But I think we'll see more directions where team wants to take their teams, and maybe triple frontline is where we do, I guess, maybe.
Thoughts on the team in general, because a really great second half phase number 1, and now you started off pretty well here so far in phase 2. You're 2-1, third place in the league. What are the small next steps you guys want to take? Any areas in your game specifically that you look to clean up, or is it more a consistency thing, playing like this on a more regular basis?
Having a consistent pick ban, I think, is a big deal for us. It's not so easy to tell from the outside in when we just don't pick well. Like, we didn't pick well against the Bolts, and we just got ran over. I mean, it looks like a different player from who I was today to who I was 2 days ago against the Bolts. I went like something like 0-7 on Erlang, and it's mostly to do with the gods we chose to pick, including the Erlang. So it's like... I think that's what we need to figure out the best, because I think our team fight and our team play is really good right now.
And hey, Twig, you're a different man today than you were at least a couple of weeks ago. We understand you recently got married, so on behalf of myself and everyone else, big congrats to you and your new family. A beautiful wedding. We wish you guys nothing but the best moving forward.
Thank you.
Absolutely, Captain Twig. Thanks for sitting down with me. Congrats on the win. Congrats on the wedding. We'll talk soon.
Thank you.
Great to hear from Twig. Great to see Twig back to his winning ways. And again, congrats to Twig on his beautiful wedding that happened. I believe it was last weekend that happened. And then I think right back in action the next day after his wedding and won that set there for the Camelot Kings. So always keeping things real there as Captain Twig. Taco, I think this is a good way to get not even so much back on track, but get that momentum building up for this Kings team, because it was disappointing the way that the Phase 1 playoffs ended for them. So starting off Phase 2 in this type of way, it has got to be a good step.
Definitely probably feels like a step in the right direction. And like Twig mentioned, I'm sure that as time goes on, those variety compositions that he's talking about, no pun intended, by the way, for the player of the Camelot Kings, it's just that the new meta has definitely opened things up, and I'm personally really excited to see some of the compositions that come as a result in the future.
That's right, and we've mentioned all along today how the weekend started off with some lengthier sets and then quite the opposite down the stretch. 3-game sets were all we had in the first half of the weekend, and then 2-game sets to round things out here. All started off with the Atlantis Leviathans taking down the Jade Dragons. That was a big one, a 3-game set there. And the Olympus Bolts taking down the Camelot Kings. So Camelot Kings happy to get back to their winning ways. And here's how things are reflected after the games we had this weekend. Leviathans and Bolts up top. No surprise there after the way those teams have been playing. The Jade Dragons have had some tough matchups, starting their climb a little bit up with a win over the Valkyries here today. Camelot Kings, though, Taco, I think top half of the league is where this team is destined to be.
Definitely going to be a fun one, seeing how things pan out for them as time goes on, because they're certainly looking like top contenders for the league right now.
Let's see what we've got in store for us next weekend. This upcoming week, we've got 6 more matchups, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Camelot Kings right back in action on Friday up against the Valhalla Valkyries. So, bounce back chance for the Valkyries, continued momentum chance for the Camelot Kings. The Jade Dragons will look to get their win-loss record right back towards even with the Oni Warriors. And then to round out the weekend, Taco, Jade Dragons up against the Olympus Bolts. Is that where your eyes are on the schedule here? That's my anticipated matchup of the week. Anything else stand out to you?
Well, possibly that Atlantis Leviathans versus the Tartarus Titans set, Dolson. I think that there is a very strong likelihood that we could see some very interesting stuff between those two teams. I know we say interesting a lot. It's probably one of the friendlier terms that we can use. Intriguing, enlightening.
Wild.
Yes. It'll be crazy, that's for sure. But I actually think that with what we see
Production
from the Titans...
said poggers.
Yes, poggers. Poggers is always a good one. But for real, though, I definitely think that Atlantis Leviathans, Olympus Bolts, they're both looking to continue solidifying themselves at the top of the league. And with Tartarus Titans kind of seeming to find a little bit of their flow at times, hit or miss, but I think they might be able to find it with the level of competition they're up against.
I'm intrigued next week how the Oni Warriors start to stand out as well, because who knows? That's a team that's a lot of fun to watch, and they need to get some momentum going here as well, similar to the Valkyries. Starting to get to that back half of the year, and now it's time to get things going. But what a week we had this weekend here in the SPL. Big update. Boots are gone. Teams figuring things out. The ups and downs, the ebbs and flows. We had it all here this weekend. But unfortunately, it all must come to a close. So on behalf of myself, Taco, all the other casters, everyone back in production, thanks for watching. We'll see you on Friday. Woohoo!